Thanks for joining the Three Dad Bods podcast. Today we discuss the Nashville school shooting and one of our friends, Officer Marc Atkinson of the Phoenix Police Department, who passed away in the line of duty. The Nashville shooting just reminded us how precious and how sudden tragic loss can be, and what happens when we are left to cope with our loved one's loss. Brent and I discussed the shooting, the reaction of the Nashville Police Department, and our own loss when our friend was lost in the line of duty. Today's podcast may be a little more somber, but hopefully it reminds us all of what is important when this type of event occurs in our communities. So sit back and listen to Three Dads podcast today.
Hey everybody, welcome to Three Dad Bods. I'm Brent Whitley with Carl Kristen. Got two of the Three Dad Bods here again.
Yeah.
Happy week to you. How you doing, man?
Well, just getting over a pretty nasty cold. So sorry if I might sound a little scratchy to some of you. We'll try to make it sound as good as possible.
You have that smoking 1 pack a day Marge sound about your voice there.
Yep, 5 packs a day. That's what it does.
So before we kick it off, again, we talked about it a little bit last week, but how you been with your transformation challenge here?
Oh, a lot better. Kind of the
Good.
cold kind of created a necessity in a sense. I've been drinking a ton of water.
That's good.
So, yeah, even pineapple juice and Tabasco juice and salt.
Tabasco juice?
Anything to try to clear this up. It's a real nasty virus.
Is it a virus? Is that what you got? You got the vid?
Yeah, it's not COVID. There's no fever. It's just I couldn't talk from literally Thursday until last night, until this morning. So this is the first time I've been able to communicate since Wednesday.
If we were in 2020, nobody would be able to listen to this podcast because you would have become infected by COVID just by listening to this podcast.
Exactly.
Here.
Not everything nasty is COVID, man. So this podcast is great. All right. So how's your week go?
I'll say it's an interesting week to say the least. Started off this week with an absolute tragedy, and I'm sure everybody heard about the school shooting here in Nashville.
Terrible.
Yeah, absolutely terrible. It's sad that somebody woke with the intention to end the life of a poor 9-year-old child. Somebody gets to that point is just absolutely mind-boggling.
There's got to be some emotional, psychological reasons, but yeah, it's terrible.
One thing about the city of Nashville, though, that I will say is it is a very, very strong community. We don't put up with the outside media noise, and a lot of people were upset about the miscategorization of the shooter and stuff, but we don't care about stuff like that. A mentally ill person went in and killed 6 people, whether man, woman, dog, bird, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it happened. And then Friday night, some huge storms hit the south area
some
here.
Major tornadoes.
And there was one that touched down. It was probably about 20, 25 miles south of here. One thing, and I get asked this all the time about Nashville, how can you, live with all them tornadoes and all that? And the thing about Nashville is it's a very, very hilly area. There's a lot of mountains that are inside Nashville. It's not a flat area. So what we find is a lot of tornadoes will come across Memphis, they'll come this way, but then the winds hit the hills and it kind of breaks everything down. And so it kind of jumps over Nashville and then it'll start back up probably about 40, 50 miles east of here. Now, that's not to say that we don't get tornadoes here in Nashville, because when we do, they're big. And
I've always wanted to ask you this. What's the closest you've ever been to a real tornado?
1 mile.
There?
1 mile.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
The first spring that we moved here, this was April of 2006, I was driving home from work. Now you got to remember, we're Utahns. We know nothing about this at all. We're hearing all the alerts. And so very nervous, not sure what to do. My parents were here, I remember. And I was driving home from my office and I was looking north and the sky it was like nighttime. It was the middle of the day
Yeah.
and north, it looked like midnight straight north. And so I
Wow.
was driving home and I come up over this ridge and I'm talking to Tracy and I'm like, hey, baby, I think we're going to be okay. It looks like we're just south of everything. We should be fine. I didn't realize this. Most tornadoes happen on the south end of storms. So,
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
yeah, I did
Interesting.
not know that either. So I turn on to our street. I get off the phone with her. I'm about a mile from our place and I'm going past, we have it's called Church of the Nazarenes. It's on our street heading up towards our place. I look to the left and out of the sky, I see the funnel cloud come down. And
Holy mackerel.
I was like, oh my God, that's a tornado.
Uh,
Like
uh,
literally looked at a tornado come down. And the car in front of me stopped. He saw the same thing that I did. So I honked my horn. He took off. I took off. I come around the corner to our house and I opened up the garage and there were two people that were running to a house across the street. And I yelled at them. I said, get in our garage, hop in our garage. So they got in our garage. We pulled our kids in our garage, put my parents down in the garage because our garage sits below our house. And then I grabbed my wife and I'm like, hey, let's go watch it. So like idiots, we
yeah.
came out onto our back porch where I am right now. And we watched it. Like I looked directly east and we could see the tornado moving across.
Oh,
And
wow.
one thing I remember is that it was deathly silent. No birds,
Yeah.
no animals, no nothing, completely
Oh,
silent.
they got out of there. Yeah, they're smart. Not like you.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. The second thing I remember is I looked up in the air and I saw this thing up in the air. Now down the road from us, they were building a new grocery store down there. And I looked up in the air and I realized that was the porta potty spinning around in the sky up
That's
above
funny.
us,
Oh
going
my
around
gosh.
literally in a circle. So, yeah, that tornado ended up destroying 1,100 homes. It was really incredible to watch what the power that nature has. Nobody has power like nature has. I'll tell you that right now. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah,
incredible.
nature's pretty powerful. Let's go back a little bit though when you were talking about that shooting in
Yeah.
Nashville. One thing that really impressed me was excuse me, I watched a video that was played the next day when the police went into the school. The professionalism, the speed in which they got to the shooter really impressed me with the local PD.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of someone we know, and just the fact that these guys put their lives and women put their lives in the line of fire, literally. It's just amazing to me. I mean, I could feel my heart beating as I was watching that video. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. From the time that the 911 call went out until the time that they put the body down was 14 minutes. From the time that they put their vest on and got their equipment to the time they put the body down was about 8 minutes. A couple things that really stood out to me. First of all, as they entered the building, there was a school employee that was outside that gave incredibly pertinent information as to what was going on, where it was going on. Without that assistance, it could have definitely taken longer. You got to remember these are officers going into a situation We know all the details now. They don't know the details then. Going
They
into a
had no idea.
situation, absolutely,
Yeah.
into a building that you have no idea of the map layout or anything like that on, and not being aware of what you're going to see, what you're up against, how many people, and so unlike, we all know the tragedy that happened in Texas, where they waited outside, just
Oh
continually
yeah.
waited and waited and waited. They did not wait. There was only one thought on these officers' mind, and that was to stop the situation as quickly as possible. Um, they absolutely need to be commended for what they did. I don't know if you noticed this, but one of the things I noticed, and I'm sure this is something that they're probably going over in their head, is one of the doors going upstairs was locked, and so they
Yep.
had to go to another entrance to go upstairs. And then you hear gunshots, and then they attack the scene and put an end to the situation. But I imagine right now they're probably thinking in their head, if they could have gone up those original flight of stairs, maybe they could have saved one or two lives. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the thought going in their head. But the the act and motions and the way that they pursued the situation was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, yeah, and you think, and this is what I was thinking at the time. I walk into work, I never have to worry about being shot at. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. I have a family at home. So are these guys. They're
Yeah.
walking into a building with very minimal armor on. I mean, those guys had maybe a bulletproof vest on. They were very open. In other words, if the shooter had let loose, or a series of shots at them, they could have easily been hit and killed. And
Right.
the thoughts I had when I was watching that was, these kids may or may not have had any, connection with these officers, but they didn't care. They just went right in, did their job exactly the way they were supposed to, and dispatched the shooter. I mean, it was a pretty, amazing display of professional police work, and Nashville PD should be commended for that. I mean, getting a medal for that for sure.
Well, and let me add a couple other things too. It is the most scrutinized job that there is. It is the
Yeah.
only job where you are monitored with a video 24 hours a day with every motion and every move that you make. And it is a job that, a week or two before this, these officers were denied a pay increase. They were denied money that goes towards recruiting. And so
Oh, I had no idea. Yeah.
it's a profession that is constantly being reduced in funds. And when that happens, the city of Memphis is a good example of this, because I think we all understand what happened a few weeks ago with the terrible situation that's there. But the city of Memphis recruits police officers, not the police force, the city. So you have
Mm.
politicians that are screening people. They don't know what to look for. They don't know
Yeah.
how to identify things. And so now you get those who are becoming police officers. You're going to find people who probably should not have been, where the city of Nashville uses their police academy and the police department to screen officers. And that's
Why is it
being
so
reduced more
different?
and more. It's a tale of two cities. And you're seeing the Memphis diagram more and more across the country. You're seeing the defunding of police officers. You're seeing a push to have I mean, can you imagine if a social worker went into this situation? Like a lot of people want,
Yeah.
you would have had 200 dead children, 40 dead adults, and one dead social worker.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so it's taking away from good men and women who did their jobs very well, but has been politicized. And listen, I'll be
Oh
honest with
yeah.
you.
The victims.
There are some situations where what had happened should not have happened. But you find that in every job profession. You find individuals who are corrupt. And yes, that is there. But I think the focus should have been on identifying and focusing on how to eliminate the corruption. Let's pay police officers, firemen, teachers a higher salary for the toughest positions in the world, and let's clean things up, you know?
You know what's made me kind of sad is watching the aftermath. Of course, you got one side that wants to blame guns, and then you have another side immediately that wants to blame the sexual orientation of the shooter. What about the victims? What
Yeah.
about the people, the families? Why can't we have like a 3 or 5 day period of time where we all kind of agree to park our biases and focus on those families and helping them and those police officers when they get involved in something like that? I mean, it's appalling that our country wants to tear itself apart after every one of these shootings. It's incredibly disgusting.
It is. You have a poor 9-year-old girl who was reaching up to hit the alarm to make everybody alert of the situation, and she lost her life. You know,
Wow.
we're talking 9-year-old children. And what gets lost, I think what is lost in today's society is holding people accountable for their actions. We don't do that
Mm-hmm.
anymore. We give people excuses for doing what they did. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, you know, that's the problem with your generation is I feel that they refuse to hold people accountable. And this person said, well, yeah, we do. We always do. What are you talking about? And I said, I'll give you an example. In a school shooting, what do you blame? And it was quiet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we focused on the tool rather than the person itself. It wasn't a weapon or anything that killed these children. It was a person, a human being, another
Mm-hmm.
human being that did this.
It
And
obviously had problems. I mean,
yeah,
I don't. I mean, you could blame. I guess you could blame politics to a certain extent, but anybody that would walk into a school and shoot innocent little kids, there's something wrong with them.
it's
We got to get
100% to
better.
blame on the person
Yeah.
themselves. And
Yeah.
wish I agree with what you said. I wish that in a circumstance like this, we never ever talked about the person who committed the crime. I wish that for,
Mm.
like you said, 3 days, all we talked about were the individuals that lost their
Yeah.
lives and their families. And that should be the focus of the whole entire thing. And then as
Hey.
details come out, that's fine. But let's go back and study the details and find out, all right, what traits did this person show? What characteristics? What red flags went up to be able to stop and prevent this from happening again?
Well, believe it or not, the media, the mainstream media, is kind of um, moved to the next subject at hand. So we're not hearing much
No,
about
Trump was
what
arrested.
the
It's amazing how we suddenly forget about it.
yeah.
Let's throw this
Yeah.
out there now. Let's take their eyes off of
Yeah.
it.
Well, what I was going to ask you with the shooters, I heard a rumor that the father of this disturbed individual had communicated to social services in the community that there was a problem and that she was getting guns. And for some reason or another, we don't have the ability to stop someone like that. Can you comment on that? Did you see anything in the media locally that would have expanded on that?
The only thing first of all, I didn't hear that. So that's the first
Oh,
time that I've heard that.
okay.
What I did see was a text message that she had sent to her friend stating, I cannot live anymore. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm ending my life today. You're probably going to hear about it on the news.
Wow.
Um,
To,
that's a trigger. Call 911, get help immediately. Get this person back on the phone, do whatever it takes, you know? And
track her down.
listen,
Yeah.
look, everybody, in hindsight, it's easy to say these things now because it's already happened. But at
Yeah.
a time in a situation, it's a different story. It's a different timeline. It's a different wave, you know. And um, it's it's just tragedy is what it is, and it's a tragedy that keeps happening. Um, every time it happens, it just feels like that we try and get torn more and more apart from each other instead of really have anybody yet to here sit down and talk about real solutions.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let's talk a little bit about you mentioned a good point about Nashville reacting in an incredible way. I experienced something similar when a friend of ours passed away when we were down in Phoenix. Um, and, we were talking about this episode for a while because he was a good friend of ours when we grew up in that neighborhood on Trail. And, we talk about him every year. Why don't you go through what happened to him that day, and maybe even start a little bit before how he met Karen and his wife, and how he moved down to Phoenix, what kind of spurred that, and then also what led up to that fateful day, and then describe the day for us, and then I'll talk a little bit about the funeral when we get to that point.
Yeah. So on March 26th, 1999, our good friend Marc Atkinson was taken from us. He was a police officer for the Phoenix Police Department. He was following suspects, part of a Mexican drug cartel. What
Mm-hmm.
he was staking out a location where they were. He was with another officer at the time. That officer got called onto another emergency and had left the scene, and so Marc was there continuing to watch. He
I didn't
saw,
know that about the other officer. Yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting. Okay.
yeah. He these group of men left this building. They took off. Marc began pursuit. I don't know how far they went. What I know is that they went into a warehouse district. They had stopped their cars, a couple turns and stuff like that in there. And so when Marc came around the corner, they were there waiting for him, and they basically lit up his car, and Marc was killed on site. Um, I I don't know if you remember, Carl, but that day that we all came down, there was a vigil that was at that site where it happened.
I do. I do. It was a huge vigil.
Yeah, it,
I
it
mean,
was. And the city of Phoenix really came together and
oh,
embraced the
incredible.
situation.
Yeah.
There were leaders from the Hispanic community that stepped up condoning what had happened. There were several people that came together in a group as a city and came together. So, um, it was a tragedy, but it truly became an event.
Well, there
Um,
were two other officers gunned down that same year in Phoenix,
mhm,
from what I remember.
shortly after, yeah.
Yeah.
Since that time, he's got a middle school named after him, which
Yeah, he does.
I went back in 2009, on March 26th, just to, I guess, commemorate 20 years from
Oh
when that
wow, I
happened.
didn't know you did that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I went and visited the site where it happened. And
Hmm.
then I just kind of, went to his burial place and just kind of sat and talked. And every year, I think about that day. I don't get upset about what had happened per se. I mean, obviously saddened and heartbroken about what had happened. And I think about, 29 years of memories that we had. I think he was 29 years old. He actually was 28 years old, married with a beautiful wife, one 6-month-old child. His wife
Yeah.
Karen is absolutely one of the most strongest people I have ever met. To go through a tragedy like this as a nurse in a hospital, the strength and courage that she showed and continues to show through this day is absolutely amazing. But
Let me ask you, have you talked to his son,
yeah,
or how old is his son now?
his son is 20. Well, he was 6 months old at that time, so he'd be 23 now.
23.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
same age as my daughter. My wife was about 6 months, 7 months pregnant at the time, so with our firstborn.
Okay.
But I the thing that I get most upset about is we've been robbed. We were taken of 23 years of memories now that I could have had with him. 23 years
Yeah.
of beach trips, 23 years of going to visit, 23 years of him coming out, 23 years of being families together and stuff. That was taken. I don't have that place in my thoughts and memories. I have 28 years of memories that I will never ever forget, but 23 years of 20, actually coming up now 24 years, I apologize, of missed times together. And
Now his shooter went to prison, right?
yes, life sentence.
And has he recently been released?
No, he is
Do you
not.
know?
They've had some parole hearings
Okay.
to be released. I believe this last one his son attended. By the way, also, when
Hmm.
his son graduated high school, the Phoenix Police Department came out.
Did they really?
Um,
Wow.
that was a tremendous sign of respect because his father wasn't there for that, but they were there for him. And I can't say enough on how much the Phoenix Police Department has done for his family, and commemorating and remembering who Mark was.
The blue line gets a bad reputation, unfortunately, because of what's happened the last few years with the BLM protests. But I think they aren't recognized for the quiet things they do like that. Um, I mean, one of the impressive things I saw too at his funeral was just the community as well, the incredible turnout for his funeral, um, the flyover at the cemetery. Um, I mean, it was as I've been to military funerals, and I think this was a bigger deal to the city of Phoenix than some of the military funerals I've been at. I mean, it was incredible. It was. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, and haven't seen anything like it since. So I have to admit, I was really impressed with the city of Phoenix that day.
Yeah,
So
if anybody has attended a funeral service for a fallen police officer, um, at the very end, there is a PA announcement. I don't know if you remember this from 911 dispatch,
yeah,
from the police
oh yeah,
dispatch,
yeah,
which is an end of duty.
that's sad.
And
Yeah,
I can still remember it. I still remember the emptiness that I felt. I've listened to it a few times before, but when you hear, you and I have a different relationship because we know Mark. We don't know
yeah,
Officer Atkinson. I mean, I've been around Officer Atkinson. We used to He used to take me up in North Phoenix because he was bored, and we would cruise around at night in his police car with the lights on, just flying around because there was nothing to do in North Phoenix. But that's who Mark was. Mark wanted in the action. Mark wanted to be in the most difficult areas. He wanted to make a difference to the city of Phoenix and the citizens of Phoenix, to help a situation that is growing worse every single day. That's who he was. And
well,
you and
want to
I
know
were with
something?
that. We understood that about him.
This happened before Desert Storm.
No, after.
I
Oh,
was
sorry.
yeah. This happened after, but this was back before my mission. I just got my mission call, and I bumped into Mark. We had just happened to be talking out on right by his house. Actually, I don't know where I was going at the time, but so we were just chatting, kind of catching up, and he was telling me he was entering the Marine Corps, and I was like, dude, why would you want to enter the Marine? I mean, he's like this music guy. I mean, he plays the piano, plays a trumpet. I mean, the guy's fantastically talented in terms of musical skills. And I mean, you guys were a little closer at the time than he and I were. I mean, we'd grown up together and, taken piano lessons with the same piano teacher, and our moms were friends, and his mom worked at my dad's company. And, so there was a lot of interchange in the neighborhood. But you and in Brent, or you, Matt, and I don't know, I think he was pretty close to Sean too. But you guys were really tight at the time. But so this was kind of a get to know a little more about, what his life was like in the moment. And so he was telling me he was going to the Marine Corps, and I was just like, wow. And then a year later, Desert Storm broke out. I was on my mission, and I was thinking about where the heck is Mark? And he was in the middle of it, just like you were talking about. Was he on a Humvee or some sort of M2 Bradley in the middle of Kuwait, wasn't he, at the time? Do you remember?
He was in a sand hole. he was in an LAV in a sand hole. Did not get to fire his gun once, but I remember two things I remember. First of all, when he was talking about going into the Marines, he came back from boot camp, came over. We actually met him in Tooele after boot camp. He came in and we went over and saw him and stuff. Come on back. First thing he said to me, he says, Brent, I know 101 ways to kill a man. If you ever join the Marines, I will use every one of them on you. I had no interest in joining any military at all whatsoever. But so in the war, I remember he came back and he had all these Camel cigarettes. I mean, like a lot. More than a grocery store had, And I was like, what is this? He's like, Brent, like these people, these soldiers for Iraq were so happy to see us. They didn't have anything to give us as thanks, so they gave us their Camel cigarettes. So
oh wow,
he had all these packs of Camel cigarettes that he had brought home. But I was thinking this morning, before we started our podcast, like what is one attribute that you would or that I would use to describe Mark?
Yeah, what I was going to ask you that actually. It's strange that you thought that.
Mark was a friend to everybody. There was not a person that Mark was not a friend to. Whether you were white, black, red, brown, green, purple, orange, whether you liked men, women, women, dogs, animals, whatever, Mark liked everybody. And it was a tremendous trait because he was an alpha. I was an alpha. Alphas typically don't get along too well. We had our butt-ins and stuff like that. He was, like you mentioned, musically inclined. I was athletic. Two polar opposites. But yeah. Mark made you feel like you were his very best friend, no matter who you were. And that is a tremendous attribute. And that's why he was so successful in the military. That's why he was so successful as a police officer, because he literally cared about everybody.
I remember that when I was in, I moved into that neighborhood when I was in the fourth grade, and he was the first one to reach out to me in that group that we grew up with.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just wanted to get to know me, and we were weird fourth graders, but you know, it was pretty cool. And I felt pretty comfortable immediately with Mark and his family.
Yeah. I can remember a yellow Ryder moving truck pulling up, and out of the passenger seat pops out this little 7-year-old kid. He was a little boy too. He's tiny, with the whitest hair I've ever seen. Pure white,
Yeah.
almost silver, wearing this straw cowboy hat.
Just like Rita.
Out. And at that moment, you know, there was myself. I don't remember who else was there, but it was the beginning, you know. I'm here. This is where I live. And this is home, you know.
And Darren was the exact opposite in terms of the sports. He was the athlete in that family, and Mark was the musician, wasn't it? So,
yeah,
I don't know. Is April play? Do you know? I'll have to ask her. So April, chime in, let us know. But that's awesome. Well, I was going to ask you, Brent. This is, I know each year you get pretty emotional this time of year, and I mean, I understand it because I had a really close friend pass away a few years ago too. And it's the guy that you can tell everything to, the guy you can share. I mean, women have a lot of friends, I've noticed in life. Men, we have 2 or 3, you know, the rest of us are, you know, everybody at work, you know, but it's really rare to have like a best friend other than who you're married to. And so, what do you do, or how do you move through that when you're starting to feel those waves come, when you're thinking about Mark? I mean, what kind of memories make you smile the most and help you get through it?
Well, every year, Matt calls me. You know, we talk, you know, and then we always end the phone call with "I love you, bud." You know, Sean and I talk. You and I spoke. I think we kind of have a unique friendship. Not a lot of people grow up together and then continue to maintain the type of relationship that we have. You know, we talked about it on a couple episodes, how long you and I have known each other, how long we've known Sean. You know, there's you know, Sean, there's Matt, there's Curtis. I've known those 3 people my whole entire life. Like, you know, I'm 6 months older than Matt. There's only 6 months that I have not known Matt. So 6 months. You know, there's 3 months difference between Sean and I. You know, and so it's unusual because so many people move around so often, and then you lose track. But we never moved. You know, I mean, you moved in. But you didn't move out, you know.
Right.
And so you moved in at a time when, you know, kids and stuff form relationships with people, and we were able to maintain, you know, you and I have always remained close. You know, we've always talked throughout the years. I remember when we got down.
In fact, I feel closer to you now than I actually did growing up.
Yeah, and it's because we talk more now. You know, we have a lot more in common with families and, you know, experiences and stuff like that. I remember when let's see, Curtis and Paul and myself, we drove down to Phoenix for everything that happened when it was happening. We stopped, we saw Matt down in St. George, stayed the night with him, and then we continued on the next day. And I remember the first people that we saw was you and Glenn. You and Glenn were you know, Glenn lived already in Phoenix, but you guys were already down there. And
Yeah,
I
I
just
was
remember
staying
you and
with
I,
him.
hugged each other,
Yeah, yeah,
and
it was a tough moment.
yeah, and then I don't know if you remember, but like, I mean, we were all there, the whole neighborhood was there. Scott was
Yeah,
there, his brother was there, and I don't know if you were with us, but after the funeral, after everything, we went to a sports bar in downtown Phoenix, and we were having drinks, we were talking, we were sharing memories, we are playing some games, and then Curtis went over to a uh like a one of them games where you it's the hoop game, where you
oh
shoot
yeah.
the ball. Anyway, the change thing was open. And
Oh no.
so we played all night long that game,
Oh
and
no.
we just kind of knew that was from Mark. You know,
Yeah.
he made that happen just to be with us, just so that we could have a moment of happiness in remembering who he was, what he was, and who we all were. And maybe that's a moment in our lives that's kind of been our glue to keep us together. Just kind of
Hmm.
a memory of our youth and growing up, and we're always going to be in each other's lives one way or another.
I remember. I think the best camp I think that we ever went on was Zion's with
Yeah.
Kim and my dad, and we had the whole crew. And you and Mark, I think, were in the same tent. And I don't know if I was with Glenn or not, but it was kind of funny though, the all the different stories that we had down there, and that picture in the Narrows,
Yeah.
all of us. I mean, it's a Sandlot picture, right? And if you want to see it, it's on our website and the group page on Facebook. But every single one of us that grew up together. Well, there were a few missing parties, but most of us were there, and it's an iconic shot that I'll always remember. I
Yeah.
had no idea where. I mean, just think about it. Remember that morning walking through the Narrows. I mean, if you could skip ahead 40 years, is your life the way you would imagine it?
No, I don't think any of us could imagine anything that's going on right now. I mean, you're talking about a
Yeah.
life before cell phones. You're talking about a life before the internet. You're talking about a
Yeah.
life before, vast news outlets. You're talking about, a life where like you woke up in the morning and you read Sunday comics. I remember going through the sports page in a newspaper, and that's how you got your sports information. It,
Yeah.
it it was a different time, and my wife and I were talking about this just yesterday. In fact, it it felt like a difficult time, but when you look at it now, it was a much, much easier time.
It was.
There wasn't
It
all this
was more.
pollution and stuff, that clouts everything. And I will say, with social media, it's enabled us all to remain close. I will say that there are good points to that. But, I mean,
Well,
this
what?
conversation we have right now would be a long distance phone call, in 1984.
Well, the one thing, it kind of made me think for a second, even while you were just talking about how different it is now, is right before the podcast, I'd asked Brent for a video of Mark, and he's like, "I don't have one, dude," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know of one either."
Yeah.
And usually, I can go back in a Facebook video log and go back 10 years, but that's about as far as we can go. 10 years ago, everything's been recorded since on video, Instagram, Twitter, and like a podcast like this, but we don't have those memories videoed from 1990 or 80, 84.
Yeah.
It's
It was
just not,
pictures.
didn't do it. Yeah.
And
Or your parents had the old film thing where they,
oh yeah.
and there's no sound.
Yeah. You
Those
would
are
take
horrible.
pictures, and then you would take it to a Kodak what is it, chromatone or whatever booth,
Yeah.
you drop it
Yeah.
off, and boy, I remember it was like it was like the
2 years
greatest
later.
coming when they had 1 hour photo development. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I could drop these off and
Yeah.
pick them up in an hour and see my pictures.
Yeah.
The greatest thing ever.
So technology has improved so much in such little time. It's almost scary. So they're talking in the future, and this is and I don't know how I feel about this. Avatars that have passed on, people that have passed on, that basically they take hours and hours of video and audio and they download it and then they create a AI version of you so that your family can memorialize you forever and ask you questions and talk to you. That seems almost creepy to me. I don't know, maybe I'm just not hip enough or tech savvy enough, but I mean, how do you feel about that?
That's earlier this week you put together an audio clip,
Yeah.
which in the very beginning I thought this is really cool, but then literally a second later I thought,
Oh,
wow, this is kind of frightening. you know
yeah.
and Carl sent me these audio clips where it's my voice saying that how a huge Kittens fan I am. Sounded exactly like me. The same
Yep.
tones, the same talking patterns, everything is as if it was. And I played it. I played it for my wife. I played it for friends at work, and they look at me like, "Oh, what's the big deal?" And I was like, "I did not say this.
Yeah, you didn't.
I did not say this." And they looked at me. I'm like, "Yeah, this is kind of frightening." And this,
Yeah.
obviously then if you can do this, it makes you start to wonder how much of everything we've heard has been done like this. And now there's
Yeah.
video AI, where they can transpose you into videos and put you in situations. It's just,
Yeah, you think the technology just came out last week?
yeah,
No, someone's had tech access to this for a long time.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's going to be more and more important. Now there are, one thing you have to look at though. Every time there's a huge change in technology, we get scared of it. It's normal. It's part of being human. You're worried about the unknown, just like you're talking about. The problem, though, or the benefit of these technologies is like this podcast, where we can communicate with one another, talk about our friend that passed away 20 years ago, or how many years again? 20,
99. So this would be year 24.
24.
Yep.
So, we wouldn't have had this conversation. We wouldn't have been able to share these moments with anyone in a way where it can reach as many people as it can today. And so, I guess I'm putting a pause on being too scared of the technology. Just more information, more input is needed, and then we can see where this goes from there. But certainly there is a pause and concern if you can completely make up someone's voice and likeness and then record
Yeah.
whatever you want with them.
So let
That's
me
crazy. Anyway,
ask you a question. I know
yeah.
I shared with you the other day the experience that had happened to me on that day, but kind of I haven't heard from you about the day that you had found out. Kind of explain to me, how you found out, the emotions that you felt, and then some of the memories that you have of going down there and being around that event.
Yeah, it's a good question because you had a pretty interesting story too that Taylor's with that. So in the pattern in my life is from that old neighborhood. If I'm going to get any bad news, it's going to be from Glenn. So I'll be on my phone and there's the 480 area code call. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I pick up and Glenn's like, the previous few times it was his mom, his grandmother had passed away or, someone died in the ward. And I thought, well, okay, hopefully it's nothing too big, too big here. And then he tells me, Mark passed away. And I said, well, what happened? And he just said, he kind of gave me a short version of what you talked about. And I was just floored. I mean, it was the first time anything happened to our age group, to someone in our group, the group that we grew up with. Dave Gunn had died, but he was a few years older.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of shocked me. And I know you two were really close. And so I immediately thought, well, hopefully he's probably heard about it already, but I'm going to just give him a call just in case. And so you didn't pick up. So I left, I think it was your Google Voice number or something like that. No, we didn't have Google Voice back then.
Regular answer.
Anyway,
machine.
I just left them. Yeah, I just left the message.
Kids, a long time ago, we had telephones just in our homes. And if we weren't there, we had what was called an answering machine, where you would leave a message.
There were no texts. Yeah, there were no texts. Sorry, folks. So I would have probably just texted you normally now, but I thought, well, maybe Brent hasn't heard. So I called, and you didn't pick up, and so left a message. And then you called me later, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell kind of go through, I think your story was a little better, what happened before you got the call, because you had gotten a call from someone in your family twice, right?
So my wife was, as I mentioned, she was pregnant with our firstborn child. April, May, June. So she would have been 7 months pregnant. She was there. Anyway, we were going to go to California and see my grandma. My grandma lives in Northern California. And we had left late after work, and we were driving across Nevada, and we got to I kept having this feeling. I went past Wells, just had this feeling you should not keep going, but we just kept going and stuff. Didn't think anything about it, and finally when we got to Elko, it was just so strong, and I turned to my wife and I said, hey, I have a really strong feeling that we should stay the night here and then go back to Salt Lake. And she goes, is it because I'm pregnant? Because I'm fine, I'm comfortable. And I said, no, I just have a feeling that we need to stay here and then go back to Salt Lake. And so we spent the night in Elko, Nevada, a beautiful town, a great tourist destination. We ate dinner, played some cards and table and stuff like that, and then we headed back to Salt Lake the next morning. It's about a 200-mile drive. I think that's fair to say. So back in those days, yes, we had a cell phone, but you had what was called roaming. So once you left a major metropolitan area, you really had no phone service whatsoever.
Right.
I remember we got back to Tooele, and that's where we had phone service. And there were a bunch of messages from my mom saying, Brent, I need you to call me. And there's another one, hey, Brent, when you get this, please call me. And then another one, hey, when you get this, I need you to call me. Something's happened. Well, I have no idea what's happened, so I'm getting pretty nervous. So I call her. She doesn't pick up. Call her again. She doesn't pick up. So I call my sister, and I say, hey, Mom left me these messages to call her. What's up? And she goes, are you home? And I said, no, I'm not home. And she goes, Brent, I need you to go home. And then if you don't hear from Mom, call me. And now I'm in a panic. And I am glad that she said that, obviously, because to hear that kind of news when you're driving would not be a good situation. So
there's Carl.
Yeah. And so I get home. My answering machine is lit up. I mean, there's, I don't know how 20 plus messages on there. And I hit the answering machine, and the very first message was your message. And it says, hey, Brent, I just found out what happened to Mark. I'm so sorry. I know you guys were close. It's so tragic, that, something along those. I don't remember the exact message, but I got the gist of what it was. And
Right.
I just remember I fell to the ground. My
Yeah.
knees, my legs gave out. I dropped to the ground and just started, crying. And my wife come running in. She says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "Mark's gone." And, she goes, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. I just know Mark's gone. And, and then the messages kept going, I don't remember any other message. I honestly don't. I don't really remember anything else. But, I talked to my mom, and then, I said, and then I called Curtis, and I said, we got to go see Rita. That's Mark's mom. And so he says, "All right,
Mm.
I'll meet you over there." And so we both drove down. There were a lot of people from the ward obviously there, but I remember, um, you have to understand that at the Atkinsons, at the Bachelors, at the Morels, I never knocked on a door. They
You
never,
just walked
yeah, I
in.
just walked in because it was always home. Even being
Hmm.
29 years or 28 years old and being married and having a family of my own, just walk. So I just remember I just
You,
walked in, and there was April. Um, I think Darren was up there. I don't remember anybody was. I don't remember everybody, but I just remember running over and hugging Mark's mom, and she obviously, like any mother would be, just
oh, she
absolutely
must have been
heartbroken that her
heartbroken.
son was gone. She kept saying, "How could it be? How can it be?" And we stayed there for a few hours. Stayed there for quite some time, being with her. And then, um, I remember my wife said as we were driving back, she says, "You need to go down there." And I was like, we can't. You're pregnant. She's like, "No, not me. You need to go down there." And so literally at that moment, you know, Paul came over, Curtis came over, and we left right then. It was middle of the night, and we drove down, and
Right there.
yeah, we
Wow.
stayed the night at Matt's. Um, and then the next morning, that was in St. George. And then, the next morning we got up early and we drove down. But I remember us crying a lot, as expected, sharing a lot of stories, a lot of disbelief. And then we went straight to Mark's house when we got there. Um, Opened the door and saw Karen, strong as could be. I mean,
Wow.
what a
Yeah.
courageous woman. She came over, gave us all a hug. She'd never met, Curtis before. She'd never met. Well, she met Paul at his wedding, but, yeah. And then, she told us about the memorial that was the vigil that was gonna be going on, and we all headed over there, and that's where we saw you and Glenn, and, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I just got there barely that, and then Glenn and I headed over to the memorial right after I got in town. So
yeah,
yeah, it was the first time I'd been to Phoenix, and all I could remember is smelling those orange blossoms. Like, wow, this place is amazing.
yeah.
And then,
It was during spring training in
then
baseball, It was,
yeah, before COVID, I'd been down there on a yearly basis to see Glenn and Sean. So I need to start that back up again. But yeah, there's some good memories, man. And that's, tying it all back to what's happened in Nashville. I mean, that's the one thing about these victims of the shooting. It's happened so suddenly. You don't get a chance to say goodbye.
right.
The only goodbyes you have are the memories that you have with them, that you share with them. And, luckily for you and luckily for the rest of us, we do have some great memories of Mark. I mean, was he perfect? No. But the guy was the guy would have enriched our lives for many, many years if he would have made it past that day.
Yeah.
And it's sad that he's not a part of our lives today. I agree with you completely.
I can remember
he'd be funny to have on a podcast.
I can remember our last phone call. I could still remember his voice, but it was a week before, and we were talking. We were talking about he was getting ready to go to Mexico with his wife on a trip. He had the newborn, 6-month-old child, but we were talking about my wife being pregnant, getting ready for my firstborn child, and he wasn't there for that. He wasn't there for my secondborn. He wasn't there for my thirdborn. He wasn't there to have countless visits, and that's something that will forever be missing from our lives, or those memories that we could have continued to have. It was taken from us.
Well, there's no way to prove it, but hopefully he has been there. And, I believe that. And I believe those people who have moved on still care about what's going on down here. Maybe not on a daily basis, but the big moments, I hope they get to see those. And we can talk about it later on. So, in fact, it's about time to go later on for me. My voice is about had it. It looks like a beautiful day out in your neck of the woods. It's dark and rainy where I'm at.
Rain?
So
no snow?
Yeah, it's still snowing, man. We're going to float right down the river. The Colorado River, here we come, Lake Powell. There's 800 inches of snow.
That's insane. It's the first time ever
crazy.
I saw the first time that there has ever been 2 ski resorts with over 800 inches of snow in Utah. It's incredible.
It's insane. It's worse than 83.
Oh my goodness.
And you know what 83 was like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it's be about 83 here today, so.
Yeah, shut up. All right. Well, hey, thanks, Brent. Thanks for the memories, and look forward to picking it up next week. So
thanks for gutting it out with that voice of yours, buddy. It actually didn't sound too bad, but you get yourself feeling better for next week.
I will. And thanks again to our audience. Those few and loyal, we appreciate you. And we'll catch you next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the 3 Dad Bods podcast. Let your friends know we're on Spotify and Apple. And don't miss an episode. Rock on.